So perimeter, like I said, usually we're talking about edge to edge type of distance around a boundary. Circles don't have edges, so instead of using uh, the word perimeter, we use the word circumference as a word for the distance around a circle. So again, the distance around a circle is called the circumference rather than using the word perimeter, but basically it's the same thing. To understand the formula for circle, a lot of times we use a piece of string and we measure the distance around an object with a piece of string and uh and we can kind of see that relationship. So I will do that here in a second, but notice how one of the relationships we'll discover is if you measure the circumference with that piece of string and actually get that distance, if you divide it by the diameter, what you come up with this uh, number pi. Now pi is not really a rational number. It's slightly more than 3. A lot of times in our book, we're going to be using this 3.14 for pi. So pi for us is going to be 3.14. So in your work, if they ask you to substitute in for pi, typically we're going to be asked to substitute in 3.14. So notice how up here we were saying that pi is equal to the circumference divided by the diameter. That's always going to hold true. If I put pi over 1, I can create, again, this ratio. And what I can do is cross multiply. 1 times c is going to be c, and pi times d is going to be pi times d. So we can develop a formula that says the circumference is equal to pi times the diameter. But remember, the diameter is also twice the radius. So we can replace the diameter with twice the radius, and a lot of times it's written as 2 pi r. So usually they put the r on the end, so 2 pi times r. Because remember, it's all multiplication, but typically they like to put the number out front first, and then the number pi, and then the radius is usually how you see that written. So for circles, if I want to know the distance around a circle, we basically have two formulas. The circumference equals to pi times the diameter, or the circumference is equal to 2 times pi times the radius. So those are the two most common formulas to determine the circumference of a circle. So notice again that the circumference is it's a little over 3 diameters. Let's see if I can get this little tool to work here on that. So in our problem, notice how we have a diameter of 4. So right now we know that the circumference is a little bit over that. So we know that the circumference, let me see if I can get my little notation here to work. Right now we know that the circumference is pi times the diameter, but notice that pi is approximately 3.14. So notice that as an estimation, if we go 3 times 4, that's going to be a good estimation of the circumference, which would be 12. Okay, that's a rough approximation. So since pi is a little bit over 3.14, we know our answer's got to be a little bit over 3.14. So see if I can get this to go back to my little arrow over here. So one of the things I can do in my drawing, let me go ahead and erase this up here as well. Let's see if I can find my eraser. So let's get this out of the way. Okay. So notice how in our problem here, to find the circumference, we can wrap a string around the circle. Well, we can use animation for this. So if I play here, it's going to wrap a string around the circle. But notice how there's more string than there is circle because we got some extra left over. But notice how we started here, we went back around to that point. So it's point to point distance, but it's in a circle. So if I unwrap the string now, notice how it gives me that little dot there. So from here to here is the actual circumference of the circle. Now notice how we know that the circumference is going to be a little bit more than three diameters. So if I draw this down, there's one diameter, there's two diameters, there's three diameters. Notice that 4 times 3 is 12. Notice our circumference is a little bit more than 12. Now, what I can do though is use my ruler and I can measure the actual circumference. And so we can see that the circumference is right around, looks like they got here 12.5. So it looks like right around 12.5 there is the distance. Now, if I reset this, also notice how there's this ratio of 3.3. Remember, that's going to be the circumference divided by a diameter. So if you went 12.5 divided by 4, you're going to get about 3.3. So remember, the circumference divided by a diameter should be close to pi, which is about 3.14. So if I do one more example, let's see if I can change this diameter. We'll use a circle here and see if we can make it a different diameter. Let's see. Let's use 6. So right now we know that the circumference should be a little over three diameters. So it should be like 3 times 16 would be 18. Our diameter, our circumference should be around a little over 18. So what I can do is wrap a piece of string around it. So again, it's from here all the way back around. Now if I mark my string and unwrap it, I now have a linear distance, which now I can bring my ruler in. So if I bring my, whoop, before I do that though, notice how it's about three diameters if I play that down. So one diameter, two diameters, three diameters. Notice how it goes off my screen, but I should be able to scroll here. So notice how one diameter, two diameter, notice how it's, let's see, it keeps on going, doesn't it? Let's see here. That don't seem right. Let's see here. Pull out my little thing here. There we go. Now we got it right. Got my, I didn't have my tape measure at the end. So notice how one diameter, two diameters, three diameters is around 18, but notice how my diameter is a little bit past that. So if I put 6 in here, I know that the circumference, let's see here, the circumference is going to be basically 3.14 times 6. So 3.14. Now, actually, we can measure with the piece of string up here. It looks like it's about 18.8 or 18.9. So my circumference is actually 18.9. Now, if I divide 18.9 by 6, 18.9 divided by 6, I should be getting close to pi. So 3.15. Notice how that's close to 3.14. Now, keep in mind, if I wanted to know the actual circumference, if I go 6 times 3.14, that would give us the actual circumference, which would be 18.84. So notice that we can do this using a piece of string and a ruler, but notice how a piece of string and a ruler is very cumbersome. Uh, if I use the formula, I can get the answer much quicker than using a piece of string and a ruler. Let's see here. So I believe that's all there is with circumference and perimeter.